You've been saving for years, you've done what you've been told, but as you get closer to retirement, the question starts to creep in. And the number one question, the number one fear people have as they get ready for retirement is, do I have enough? Will I run out of money? In this video, we'll walk through a simple three-step checkup so that you can be able to answer that question confidently when you're asking, will I have enough for retirement? What I'll do is I will share my board with you. And when you're talking about retirement, there's really three things that we really do have to answer. And so the first one is, what does my retirement really look like? Let's be real. Most people skip this step. They jump right into the math. How much money do I have? How much am I going to be able to spend? But they never actually answer the question, what does a good retirement lifestyle look like for me and for you in this particular situation? So are you going to travel? Are you going to pick up any hobbies? Are you going to do anything with family? Is there any charities or volunteer work and things like that that will cost? Now, in addition to some of the wants and some of the things that we'll do, we also just have regular household expenses. So when I'm talking about your household expenses, that could be anything from your mortgage or your rent. That could be any home equity loans if you have some of that are outstanding. We would even go as far as look at your property taxes, your maintenance, just really anything for the house. It could be our cable, our electric. It could be our cable or utilities, right? Water and electric. It could be the internet, phones. All that stuff would be in your household expenses. But then we also have to consider things like our just living expenses. And so that would be things like your food, your clothes, and your personal care. We would also be looking at things like transportation. And transportation could be my oil changes, it could be the tune-ups, it could be my gas card, it could be my chauffeur if I'm being driven around. Any maintenance, gas, updating registration, all that stuff would be inside of our transportation. And then one of the ones that I often find that people don't think about enough is going to be your health care. And so we are sometimes talking about things like optimizing Medicare, whether I want to have Medicare Part C or whether I want to have a Medigap or Medicare Part D, all these different things that come into that consideration. But we do need to spend some time talking about healthcare, whether that's long-term care, whether that's just the Medicare, whether that is my doctor's expense, how often I plan on going, like co-pays and things like that. We want to also list what our overall health expenses would end up being. And then if we just want to be able to eat out and dine out and all the other entertainment, those are normally going to be the things that we sort of started at the beginning. But if I missed anything, then you would add that here as well. The reason we start with what our retirement looks like, and I joke with people, we're not Scrooge McDuck. We're not collecting money for the sake of collecting money. We're not going to go swim in a vault full of money and just like have a great day. We're going to use the money for things. Money is a medium of exchange. We trade it for things that we believe is more valuable than money. I.e., I would have money or I'd have gas in my tank. Well, I can't drive my money. I need to drive with a vehicle. So we are okay with that exchange. I would like to have air conditioning working in Florida. I'm okay giving money for an air conditioner. There are things that we are okay making that exchange. And all we're doing here is listing off all the things that we are okay making the exchange for with money. Now, it could be tricks and concerts and people you want to meet, things you want to support. There could be anything, but don't go with only the dreams. Spend some time thinking about the practical things like the food and the electric and the water and things like that. The second part of our checkout is, does my savings match my lifestyle? We have the lifestyle set up. We are good to go as far as how our overall retirement lifestyle is going to look like, but does our savings match it? And basically, when you're going to look at that, you would then say, well, how much am I going to spend per month? And if you looked at all this and you said, all right, well, Dre, my lifestyle, my ideal dream retirement lifestyle would be $6,000 a month. Okay. Which then multiply that by 12, that would be $72,000 a year. All right. So that's the amount that I need to get to maintain my lifestyle. Well, we have to then start listing off our income streams. Now, you all know I'm a big fan of having at least three income streams because 65% of self-made millionaires have at least three income streams. That's what the studies show. And then the IRS says they recognize seven income streams. So we would just choose the three that make the most sense for us in our retirement. But when you're listing your income streams, that could be anything from a pension, that could be Social Security, That could be your investments. And those investments could be things that we would say is either going to be maybe the stock market, that could be in your own personal business, and that could be real estate. Those are the three asset classes that give you access to all of the seven streams of income. The stock market is the one that has every single one of the streams. Your real estate, you will look at things like your rental and your capital gains. In your business, you could have royalty. You could also have capital gains when you sell different products and you have profits from a business. And so all of the income streams are available in there. And if you don't know how to run the math, that's totally okay. This is exactly what I do. I help people do it every single week. And I'd love to be able to help you. And the benefit is we don't sell investments or insurance, we create plans for your lifestyle. So when you're looking at your income streams, it's important to know that they're not all created equal. But if your money is invested in the stock market, normally we have the rule of 1,000 is a very quick checkup. And all we're basically saying is for every $260,000 that you have in your fund, that will create $1,000 of monthly income. And so depending on how much you have, you can figure out the amount that you would need. So if you want $4,000 a month that needs to be added, then you would say, all right, so around 250,000, that means I need about 1.1, 1.2 million. Just a very simple and dirty check. If we're talking about the profits in your business, it really does depend how much you're paying yourself and how much you get to access of the money. But depending on that, that's normally a little bit straighter of a number because you normally keep your records every single year. And so you can look at the records and simply you'll be able to see how much your business is able to generate for you each month and whether or not I need to sell my business to have that income or if someone else could run it. And if they do, I have to count that in part of my cost. That if I'm going to pay someone to run the business and then I receive a certain income, I need to make sure those numbers actually work out for my business. But your business easily could give you another 2 or 3K a month. And then your real estate, normally what you're going to do is whether the property's paid off or not, depending on the interest rate and things like that, all you're going to do is basically look at how much you net from your real estate. And when I say net, what we're saying is you take your rental income and you subtract from that your expenses. So whether you're running the property, whether you're doing the maintenance, or whether you have another company that does it and they do all the maintenance and they keep track of everything, you need to see how much money you have left over. And if that money ends up being, let's say it's like $1,000 a property to make the math easy for me, then if you needed that $6,000 a month, then you would have six properties and that would give you your $6,000 a month. If you had your stock market investments and you had your own real estate and you had a business and social security, you can see how it becomes very difficult for someone to not have millions of dollars, which is why 63% of self-made millionaires have at least three streams of income. It becomes very difficult. And so we're going to look at where the money is at. And then we would also be taking into consideration taxes and things like that to see how much you have to take out to net the lifestyle that you need. That leads us very nicely into step number three, which is going to be what's your income plan? Because you don't retire on a large lump sum, you retire on income. And so the real question is, can your savings create consistent income without running out? And this is where things like your withdrawal strategy, your tax strategies, and your healthcare comes into place. And so we don't want to be guessing when it comes to being able to afford that. And so we want to be able to build flexible, tax smart retirement income that gives us clarity, confidence, and control. Aaron, we'll go over a few things to look at. Now, you all know I am a big fan of the three bucket strategy. And so you have the three buckets. So you have like your cash and cash equivalents, and then you have your income, and then you have your growth. And the idea is this bucket is going to be 1 to 3 years of my living expenses. And that's already going to be set up and invested in cash and cash equivalents. So that could be like CDs and money market accounts. And the idea is if I have 1 to 3 years set aside, if there's ever market turmoil and then I'm at risk of losing money in my investments, I'm able to say, you know what, I can wait for the market to recover. I have at least 1 to 3 years of living expenses set aside. So I can comfortably wait for the market to recover. My income bucket is normally going to be the thing that recovers relatively quicker than my most aggressive and growth focused investment. And so normally that's going to be somewhere around 3 to 8 years. And so you can have anything in here. So this could be an annuity if you have an annuity. This can be bonds, which could be government bonds or corporate bonds. You can have either in there. This could also be your tips, which is treasury inflation protected securities. You can see that the idea of this bucket is we just want to keep up with inflation. So my cash bucket, I know I'm not keeping up with inflation, but that's okay. I'm focused on liquidity and risk protection. My income bucket, I want to be able to keep up with inflation, ideally somewhere right around that 2 to 4% range. And so my annuity is probably going to be roughly around there. My bonds are going to be around there. My treasury protected tips there, those are going to be around there. And then I've seen some where they would consider getting some value funds. So I've seen people where they put the dividends in here, but when we're talking about them, we're only talking about blue chip dividends, which means they're really going to be like Fortune 50, Fortune 100 companies. The thought is if you're in the top 50, top 100 companies, you're not really investing in me for growth. You're investing in me more or less for stability. You know, the AT&T, they already have such a huge network. There's not that many more people they could add to the network, but they are growing a relatively okay amount each year. And then we're able to get the dividends from them. General Electric's another one, they pay out dividends as well. Normally, we're going to look at dividends. I would look at things like dividend kings, which means they've been paying dividends for at least 50 years straight. Or then dividend aristocrats, I believe they've been paying dividends for at least 25 years straight. We're able to put yourself in a relatively safe position where we're not really going for it, but we want to be able to keep up with inflation. That's the idea of the second bucket. And then your third bucket would be everything that is going to be 8 plus years. And so that would be the assets that we know, like stocks or individual stocks. It could be your ETFs. I've seen people with commodities in here. Now, if you're someone that was really excited by Bitcoin and that was your fancy, then that would be super aggressive, but that would be here as well. And then you would have your own business and your real estate, right? So you still have all those things. The idea is the volatility that we deal with in this bucket, we need a little bit of time for it to recover. That even though we had 9/11 and we know the stock market cratered, it returned back to its normal and grew from there. That even though we had the Great Recession of 2008, 2009, we know that within a few years, it was able to recover way much more past that, where we had a 10-year growth span where it was one of the great bull runs of the stock market's history. And then even when you talk about COVID, when we had stocks crater because of COVID, you then see we're going to get the recovery in a relatively short amount of time. The idea is if I'm able to give myself a little bit of time living off my cash bucket, funding it with my income bucket, and then I allow my growth bucket to recover, that I increase the likelihood of me not running out of money. And I'm able to put an allocation in place that works for me. Now, this will vary depending on who you are. So you may find that you're going to have 20% of your funds in cash, and then you may have 40% of your funds in income, and then you may have 40% of your funds in growth. You may feel that that's a little bit too risky. So you may be someone who would say, I would rather have 40% of my funds in cash, and then I would have 40% of my funds in income, and then I would have 20% of my funds in growth. You could do that. It really comes down to your own risk tolerance and what makes the most sense for you. But it's important to know that just having the money doesn't create the income plan. That we want to have a withdrawal strategy that ensures we don't run out of money and maintains our overall lifestyle. So if you're asking yourself, do I have enough to retire? Don't worry. You're not alone. It's something that all of us are trying to figure out. But if you want a little bit of help with it, I'll put a link where you're able to schedule some time on my calendar. You can schedule a free complimentary retirement readiness call. In that call, I answer any questions that you have in the time that we have together. And I'll give you as much value as I possibly can to help you feel comfortable about making your decision, whether that is working at it alone, working with another professional, or working with us at Obsidian Wisdom. Click the link below and schedule your call today, and let's make sure your retirement plan matches the life that you really want.